When money gets tight, looking back at how our grandparents survived tough times can teach us a lot. Folks back then knew how to stretch every single penny to keep their families fed and clothed. Let us look at 10 frugal habits from the Great Depression we completely forgot. During the 1930s, going to the grocery store for fresh produce was a rare luxury that most families simply could not afford. People turned their backyards, side lots, and even small window boxes into highly productive vegetable gardens. These patches of dirt provided a steady supply of tomatoes, beans, carrots, and potatoes to keep everyone fed. Families spent their evenings pulling weeds and tending to crops instead of spending money on entertainment. Every single vegetable pulled from the ground meant one less item to buy with hard-earned cash. Kids learned how to plant seeds and harvest crops as soon as they could walk. Neighbors would often trade their extra harvest, swapping a basket of cucumbers for a bushel of corn. Growing your own food gave people a deep sense of pride. Even city dwellers found ways to grow herbs and small vegetables in whatever containers they could find. Throwing away a shirt just because it had a hole was completely unheard of during this difficult decade. Mothers and grandmothers spent countless hours by the fire darning socks, patching knees, and sewing up torn seams. A single pair of pants would be repaired over and over again until the fabric literally fell apart. When the elbows of a sweater wore thin, someone would carefully stitch leather or thick cloth patches over the holes to give the garment extra life. Sewing kits were a staple in every household, and young girls learned how to thread a needle before they learned how to read. If a dress became too damaged to wear, the usable fabric was cut away to make quilts or rags. Nothing went to the trash simply because it looked old or worn out. People took great care of their belongings and took pride in their neat repairs. Cooking oil and butter were expensive commodities that families used very sparingly. Whenever someone cooked bacon or roasted a piece of meat, they carefully poured the leftover hot fat into a metal tin kept right on the stove. This saved grease became the primary cooking fat for frying eggs, roasting potatoes, and adding flavor to plain pots of beans. Bread was often dipped in bacon drippings instead of butter to give it a rich, savory taste. The grease jar was a permanent fixture in the kitchen, constantly being topped off and scooped out for the next meal. Even baked goods like cookies and pie crusts were sometimes made using rendered animal fats instead of expensive shortening. Wasting even a single drop of this flavorful oil was considered foolish. Cooks knew exactly how to balance these saved fats to make simple ingredients taste like a hearty feast. Companies that sold flour, sugar, and animal feed used plain cotton sacks to package their goods. Thrifty women quickly realized this durable fabric could be washed, bleached, and sewn into clothing for their growing children. Manufacturers eventually noticed this trend and started printing their sacks with colorful floral patterns to appeal to these resourceful mothers. A family might buy a specific brand of chicken feed just to get the matching fabric needed to finish a young girl's dress. These sacks were transformed into shirts, underwear, towels, curtains, and even stuffed toys. The rough ink from the company logos was scrubbed out using harsh lye soap and boiling water. Wearing a flour sack dress was incredibly common, and mothers shared patterns to make the clothing look stylish. This clever habit turned basic packaging into an entirely new wardrobe without spending a single extra dime. Cash was incredibly scarce, so communities developed an informal economy based entirely on trading skills and items. A farmer might trade a dozen fresh eggs and a jug of milk to the local doctor in exchange for treating a sick child. Mechanics would fix a broken tractor in return for a side of beef or a winter supply of firewood. People quickly figured out what they had to offer and used their unique talents to get what they needed. Women traded sewing services for fresh produce, and men traded carpentry work for auto repairs. This system required deep trust and strong relationships within the neighborhood. You did not need a fat wallet if you had a strong back, a useful skill, or a productive garden. Bartering kept small towns functioning when paper money lost its value. Everyone leaned on each other to survive the harshest years of the Depression. Meat was the most expensive item on the grocery list, so cooks had to get creative to make a small roast feed a large crowd. They stretched ground beef and sausages by mixing in cheap, bulky ingredients like breadcrumbs, rolled oats, or crushed crackers. Meatloaf became a popular staple because it could be packed with onions and oats to double its size. Stews and soups were loaded with potatoes, beans, and root vegetables, using only a tiny bone or a few scraps of meat for flavor. A single chicken could be boiled down to make broth, providing enough liquid to flavor a massive pot of dumplings and carrots. Mothers became experts at creating heavy, filling meals that cost pennies per serving. Nobody left the table hungry, even if they only ate a fraction of the meat they were used to. These stretched meals were hearty, warm, and kept working families energized. Nature provided a free grocery store for those who knew exactly where to look and what to pick. Families spent weekend afternoons walking through woods and fields to gather wild berries, nuts, and edible greens. Dandelion greens were picked young and tossed into salads or boiled down like spinach. Blackberries and raspberries were carefully collected in tin pails to be baked into pies or preserved into sweet jams. Kids learned to identify wild asparagus, mushrooms, and hickory nuts to help stock the pantry. Fishing and hunting also became daily chores rather than weekend hobbies, providing free protein for the dinner table. A good afternoon by the creek could yield enough fish to feed a family of 6. Gathering food from the wild required time and knowledge, but it kept the grocery bill incredibly low. People respected the land because it directly sustained them during the darkest economic days. Buying new shoes or a new winter coat was a rare event that required months of saving. Clothing was passed down from older siblings to younger ones until the fabric simply could not hold another stitch. When a family ran out of younger kids, they traded outgrown clothes with their neighbors or extended family members. Community swaps were organized at local churches and schools, allowing mothers to exchange a small pair of boots for a larger size. Shoes were stuffed with newspaper or cardboard to cover holes in the soles, making them last just a few more weeks. Boys wore their older brother's pants rolled up at the cuffs until they grew tall enough to fit them properly. There was absolutely no shame in wearing secondhand clothing because nearly everyone in town was doing the exact same thing. Sharing resources ensured that no child had to walk to school in the freezing cold. Electricity was a monthly bill that families struggled to pay, so using power was strictly monitored and limited. Lights were only turned on when absolutely necessary, and families often gathered in a single room at night to share one bulb. Reading, sewing, and playing board games all happened around the kitchen table under a single lamp. Radios were played for a short time to catch the evening news or a favorite program, then promptly clicked off to save juice. People relied on natural sunlight as much as possible, opening curtains wide during the day and going to bed shortly after sunset. Leaving a light on in an empty room was a fast way to get a stern scolding from a parent. Every switch and dial was controlled with the utility bill in mind. Summer and fall were busy seasons dedicated to saving every possible ounce of food for the long, cold winter. Kitchens turned into small factories as women spent days boiling glass jars and preparing produce for the pantry shelves. Tomatoes were crushed into sauces, cucumbers were pickled in vinegar, and peaches were sealed in sweet syrup. Root cellars were packed to the ceiling with rows of colorful jars that represented months of hard labor. Preserving food meant a family would not starve when the snow fell and the garden stopped producing. Meat was often salted, smoked, or canned to prevent spoilage without the need for an expensive electric freezer. Children helped by washing jars, snapping green beans, and carrying heavy boxes down to the basement. This intense preparation was a survival skill that kept millions of Americans alive. Which of these Depression-era habits do you think would help you save the most money right now? Comment below with your answer and make sure to subscribe to American Rewind.